Hi everyone, welcome to Video in the Classroom. So who this session is good for, who this video may be good for, is listed on this slide. But in general, if you have any interest at all in using video in your classroom, this video or session might be wonderful for you to participate in. So the agenda for this video and session is we're going to first talk about ways to conceptualize or think about video in the classroom. We're going to talk about examples of using video. We're going to talk about video creation advice. And we're going to discuss the challenges and advantages video offers. So we normally in the classroom think about video as a substitute for the teacher or student themselves. For example, in a flipped classroom approach, instead of the teacher being in front of the student at home, teaching them content, the teacher uses video to substitute for themselves. Additionally, for a teacher to teach content with video, instead of relying on the teaching capacities of a substitute to deliver content, it's another way we do it. And finally, another possible way is that we sometimes just say, hey, the History Channel does a better job than we do in presenting this content, so we're going to lean on them for a bit. For some other examples, you can click that link or see some of the links in the back of this presentation or see the handout I've printed. So I want to propose to you all a new way of thinking about video in the classroom that I don't often see. We should think about video in the classroom as a vehicle to add, not substitute, but add another teacher in the classroom. And we do this, we structure this by thinking about collaborative teaching approaches. So you can see them below. This is an example of either one teach, one observe, or one teach, one assist. And in this method, a sort of general educator is responsible for the content instruction, whereas the special educator or some other teacher typically is either observing the students as a whole, observing a particular student for IEP information, or is going around and assisting those students who need it in the classroom. This is an example of parallel teaching, when two teachers split the class in half, and they each take half of the class. And in this instruction, they teach pretty much the same content. And so the main point is you get smaller groups of students with teachers, better one-on-one interaction. Station teaching is when you have different activities, different instructional points throughout the class, spread out through the class. And this is an example of that. And you can have teachers taking control over different activities in the classroom. And sometimes you can even have students sort of having self-control, maybe doing a worksheet. And the idea behind this could be like one teacher teaching one subject, whereas the other teacher is doing a skill activity for that particular subject as well. The teachers are teaching two different things, not like parallel teaching where they're teaching the same thing. Alternative teaching is in this example, and it's sometimes seen in your schools. The idea is you have a teacher take a small group of students out for intensive instruction, whereas the other teacher is teaching the majority of the kids. And team teaching is this example, where you have two teachers in front of the classroom with the same content, and they're playing off of each other, they're teaching the same thing, they're doing different slides, that type of thing. So my point is that we could think about video as not only substituting for one of these teachers in collaborative teaching, but actually being in addition in collaborative teaching. So if there's one teacher in a classroom, video can serve as the substitute for the other teacher, or adding a teacher to the classroom. Or if there's two teachers and you're doing station teaching, video can be the third teacher, the third station. What I want to emphasize is that this does not mean that principals, administrators can get rid of all their special educators. First of all, a video does not replace the valuable knowledge special educators bring about students to the classroom. They bring excellent knowledge about how students learn, how students learn best, how different students learn differently. That's invaluable. Secondly, I think it's great to even have 2 or 3 teachers in the classroom. We have 2 teachers in the classroom and a video. We can separate students into even smaller and smaller groups to get more intensive individual one-on-one pupil-to-teacher attention. And that one-on-one attention, I think, is one of the most critical things for getting maximal student outcomes in learning. In fact, that's one of my main reasons of proposing this new idea of how to think about video, is that it increases the intensity of instruction. It reduces the amount of students per each teacher so that students can get more individual attention. So now take a moment, pause this video, and discuss with the people around you examples of ways, using both presented ways of conceptualizing video, of using video in your classroom. Please feel free to be as specific as possible. So you can think about examples of activities, examples of lessons, and examples of projects, just whatever you can come up with. So these are some examples I've come up with using this conceptualization of video. You could set up a debate. Should we have dropped the atomic bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima? In this case, this would be station teaching, because you can have the teacher take the pro view, we should have, and you can have the video take the con view, we should not have. They're sort of teaching 2 different things. You can have direct instruction about what is in the United States Constitution while the teacher observes a student for the functional behavioral assessment on the student. So the direct instruction could be with video, and the teacher could be freed up to observe her class. This is 1 teach, 1 assist, or 1 teach, 1 observe. You could have the teacher teaching a historical comprehension activity about whether Abraham Lincoln supported slavery, while students learn about the Civil War through a video. This is station teaching using video. You can have a teacher teaching half the students about the Bill of Rights, while a video is teaching half the students about the Bill of Rights. This is parallel teaching. You can have a teacher using a PG version of Drunk History or The Men Who Built America History Channel series as a model for students to do a historical comprehension activity with video. And the idea, the nugget behind this idea, is that you can give a student a character like Thomas Jefferson, and you can give them a document associated with that character, like the Declaration of Independence. And the assignment could be videotape yourself seeing that document from your character's eyes. So what did Thomas Jefferson feel about the Declaration of Independence? What were his hopes? What were his dreams? What were his fears? What was his involvement in the creation of that document? That type of thing. This is more the first conceptualization of video that I showed you guys and shared with, but I think it's important to at least show that you can do historical thinking with video activities. Finally, you can use video to explore historical chronology by either the teacher or a student filming a particular part of their community throughout the entire year. And basically what you do is you're analyzing what is changing throughout the year in a particular community, what's sort of continuity or difference, that type of thing. So now take a moment, pause this video, talk with the people next to you, and brainstorm advice that you have personally thought about, uncovered, etc. When thinking about creating video, maybe you've already created a bunch of video and have hit several problems that you've overcome, that type of thing. So now I'm going to start sharing with you general video advice that I have researched and found from various different sources about, just thinking about video, how to create it and how to do it well. So there are stages that you ought to teach yourself and students when you are thinking about creating video for your classroom. They are outline, script, storyboard, filming, editing, and publishing. And these go in order, so you want to do these in order when you're actually producing a video. So the outline part is basically like writing an outline for a class paper. What the video, what students have to say, what they intend to show in their video, and their main points in the video. Just like writing a paper, you want to be as organized as possible before you start. A script. Students should write down everything exactly as they intend to say it. I've heard many stories from teachers who are commonly creating video about just messing up their language, messing up what they intend to say, and then having to close the door of their classroom because they don't want their negativity to spread in those moments. And I think scripts really help with that, but you still have to encourage students to be willing to go off the script and use it only as a scaffold for speaking, because we as human beings are not subject to a piece of paper in front of our heads talking about the content we want to share. We don't just say what we write. It's more natural that way, not to say what you write. Storyboarding. This is a unique sort of new thing that I even learned about creating video. It's basically a more involved outline, and what you're doing is you're planning what each shot in the movie involves, and lights, actions, characters, script, etc. What's going on in each individual shot. For more information, you can see the attached link to storyboarding in this slide. Finally, filming. It's basically getting the raw footage. And my advice here is that you might want to do it over a period of a month or two if you're having students themselves create video, so that you can take individual students out and they can work on their projects while everybody else is doing an alternative activity, just to keep instruction flowing so you don't have 5 days of video production going on. You also want to make sure each student gets multiple attempts at the same shot and pauses inserted in their video in between shots. And this is something I learned from doing music as long as I have, where when you're in the editing process of having video or music, if you have multiple attempts and if you have sort of extra pauses in between clips or sections of music, then you have an easier time sort of cutting out sections that you don't want, inserting good attempts at that section. You protect yourself from messing up in a way. Editing is just sort of using video editing software. And like I said, how you film can help you in how you edit your video. If you create a lot of pauses, if you do multiple attempts at the same shot, when you're editing, you can place the best shots, the best attempts where you want them, and remove the worst shots. And publishing, my best thing to say is upload it to YouTube. It's the easiest, most common way to do it. So here's some more general video advice. Insert pauses and questions in your video to avoid the video being a completely passive experience. And the problem with video is it can be 20 or 30 minutes of the teacher just giving content. And students get enough of that already. They need that interaction. They need that ability to discuss with their friends, their parents. They learn better that way. And as you've seen in this video in particular, I've tried to incorporate that principle in how I've done things. Also, make the video exciting, even if all you do is add music to the background. Remember, the two conceptualizations I've shared with you is that the video is in addition to a teacher or a substitute to the teacher. When you're actually lecturing, you have the ability to wake up students, have students sort of stand up in their desks if they're falling asleep, do a lot of different things to actually make students engaged. When you have video, you're not able to do that. And so when you make video exciting, you're trying to sort of replace what you do in the classroom in a way to engage students. Finally, do not make each clip slide part of the video too busy with information and pictures. We do better as a human race when we don't, in terms of learning, when we don't have to focus on too much, when we get maybe just text and voice or picture and voice. But when we get sort of, I've seen this before, a person's face on the video, plus text, plus pictures, plus sort of complicated graphs, etc. Takes up more of our ability to remember things at that given moment. And when our short-term memory is too crammed with things that we have to remember, then long-term we're much worse off. Finally, don't make it too long. Kids have a short attention span, and the general rule is really, I would say, no more than 15 minutes per video, at least per consecutive presentation of content. It's a little better when you have the video split up with moments of discussion, moments of asking kids questions, of kids participation, but when you just have like 30 minutes of content, it just stinks. Kids don't want to listen to that. So now we're going to go to some advice by Richard Meyer. And he's shown us some problems in video that he sometimes sees from teachers. Video sometimes offers too much extraneous processing, which is basically stuff outside of the instructional goal that you're trying to process. So an example might be putting a surfboard in a picture when it has nothing to do with the point you're trying to get across. Sometimes video is too complicated. So you might present a diagram with 50 different things on it, and it's just too much for the student to go and master. And finally, you notice that sometimes video can be problematic when you don't encourage students to go deeper, when it's just surface level content. So Richard Meyer has about 6 principles that he uses in video creation and PowerPoint creation that sort of inform how he views learning off of video, in part. They are the coherence principle, signaling principle, redundancy principle, spatial contiguity principle, temporal contiguity principle, and segmenting principle. So coherence principle, this is kind of like including something in the slide that has nothing to do with your instructional goal or content in the slide. Signal, and he's found that that's bad. Signaling principle is using highlights, using different ways to cue students into focusing on different parts of the slide, that doing this is actually good for their understanding. Redundancy principle is that it's not good to have both text on the screen and voice saying the same text. You might think that this double presentation is beneficial, but it's actually not. He doesn't see it as such. Spatial contiguity principle is that you want in pictures labels to be next to the part they describe. You don't want to have people spend time going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Temporal contiguity principle is that when you are presenting narration to a picture or presenting narration to a picture and caption, you don't want to present the information first and then do the narration. You want them to be at the same time. Finally, segmenting principle is that when you have something overly complicated, you want to break it down into small parts so that students can better handle it. So take a moment and figure out what is wrong with this slide. Pause the video, take a moment. Alright, so what I want to draw you to is, it says, a study conducted by Wilkes University reveals that people who love once or twice a week are more immune to colds than people who abstain from sex. So, as you can see when you're reading it, this is how a virus sort of breaks free from the cell, that process. And so, how well do you think that students are going to remember this sex sentence inserted in there? Pause, raise your hands, figure it out, your answer. And then how well do you think they're going to remember the rest of this, the more important part of the content? Pause, figure out your answer. Well, in reality, they will remember the sex part much more than they will remember the actual important content information. This is what principle? Pause, figure out your answer. This is the coherence principle. That sex part is unrelated to your goal in the clip or instruction. And a sort of more video type example might be that you have a video and people are acting, and someone sort of randomly for effect, has the sound of explosions, or randomly for effect has the sound of, Captain America's theme song. Since those are much unlikely to be related to what you're actually trying to get across your point, then people are going to remember that instead of what you're trying to get across. And this is just trying to bring you back to simplicity, to having our short-term memory focused on one thing at a time, instead of being sort of drawn into different parts, some that are important and some are not. We don't really need that, right? So what's good about this slide? Pause, take a moment, figure out your answer. If you notice, in this slide there are highlights, and these highlights are sort of drawing your attention to top, longer, bottom, top flows faster, bottom. And so when you're reading this, you see surface on top of the wing is longer than on the bottom. You remember that better than if you just see it as surface on top of the wing is longer than the bottom, some sort of cold, bland reading of it. When you emphasize specific parts for people, you remember it better than when you don't. An example in a video might be if you're acting out Thomas Jefferson's view of the Declaration of Independence, and you stress the importance of, his hopes about it, and in your words and how you say it, you really sort of emphasize it. Students are going to remember that emphasis. So what's the problem with this slide? You may not see it, but if you do, notice that on the bottom there's a little recording here, and that little recording basically says what's on the caption right there. It's basically just saying the same thing. This is called the redundancy principle, and the point of that is sort of think about it this way. If you're reading what's on your slides, if you're just duplicating what you say, what your slides say, and you're not saying anything new, you're not, adding to anything, you're just duplicating your slides in your voice, that doesn't help. That really does not. It's called the redundancy principle. And again, it's just overcomplicating things. What are some problems with this slide? Take a moment, come up with your answer. So I want to draw your attention to number 6, small intestine. Is that anywhere near to where the small intestine actually is? No, right? If when you're designing graphics for your video and you have labels and they're nowhere near to where the actual part is, you're asking kids, you're asking other learners to spend more time sort of processing the picture by going back and forth from the part to the text, and they learn worse as a result. And by the way, that last part was spatial contiguity. And this is how it should look. This is what our goal should be in these graphics for spatial contiguity. What's the problem with this slide? It's too much, right? And this is the segmenting principle. When we're dealing with this kind of complication, we teach better, we present information better to students when we break it up into small, different parts. We should not have complicated graphs on our slides, on our videos, because when we do, it just makes it harder. Equivalence would be, well, mostly it's just how we present the information that we present, really. And by the way, that last part is called the segmenting principle. So in general, in video and multimedia, we should reduce too much material. And I would even count having the teacher in front of a PowerPoint set of slides, presenting the slides in the video as too much. Some people would argue with me, and I understand that argument because it can be sort of more engaging to have it be more personal. But it also can be distracting if you think about it. The kid has to spend time focusing on the teacher. The kid has to spend time focusing on the slides. Their eyes are practically divided in that sense. Also, highlighting essential material. Most of us do this naturally. Redundancy. Do not add on-screen text to narrated animation. So again, it might be better for a slideshow or a video to just be text and picture and no narration. And in fact, it is better than if it's text, picture, and you actually talking, repeating what the text says. Spatial contiguity. Place printed words next to corresponding graphics. We talked about that. And this last part, I'm not sure we talked about that much in detail, but it's basically you're presenting the narration and animation at the same time. So it's not, I'm going to present the text and then 5 minutes later I'm going to actually talk about it. So before we go on, brainstorm with the person next to you about benefits and challenges of video in the classroom, using the information you learned so far. Also brainstorm some ways to overcome these challenges. So pause and think about it for a second. So I have some advantages that I've listed for everyone here, and some disadvantages I've also listed for everyone here for people to consider. So one of the biggest advantages, I think, for my new conceptualization of video in the classroom is that it reduces student-teacher ratio in the classroom. When you have video as an extra teacher, you can split the class into 4 groups, with 3 of the groups being you, your collaboration teacher, and the video, and get just as good, equal attention to all the students in there. You can split the class into 5 groups and have 2 of them be students doing whatever they need to do on their own, and have 3 of them being video and the 2 teachers. Or if you're one teacher, you can still split the class into 2 parallel groups and have more attention that way devoted to each and every student. Also, video does not require technology access outside of school necessarily, or students to learn content for homework outside of school necessarily. And the idea behind this is if you do it in the classroom, you don't have to do it out of the classroom, like that second conceptualization that I gave y'all. Also, you can put more responsibility on students' shoulders, so it's a good classroom behavioral technique to give students jobs. And so if you have video in the classroom, you can assign one of your students to be the video monitor. They start and pause a video at appropriate moments. They collect students' questions. They maybe initiate the small group discussion that you're looking for, that type of thing. Also, video is good for students who are not good in English to revisit content over and over again. Video can also improve PowerPoint organization of content knowledge. My point here is that because you have to do video in advance, and because good video is planned, it's prepared, you have scripts, you have organization, you have outlines, like I've encouraged y'all to do, you're naturally writing the story of history better. You're naturally constructing the organization better, so you have beginning, middle, and end. Sometimes I fear that in slides and PowerPoints, we as teachers often just plop the content down instead of organizing it in a way to tell a cohesive story. And video can sort of force us to do just that. Also, it allows you to time out the pacings of your lessons better. I know by the time I finish this video that my video actual talking has gone about 35 minutes. So I know that I don't have to add anything to this. And let's face it, some of us are more exciting sometimes with video than without. Challenges, student support. Students are not used to being taught with video. Parent support. Parents are not used to it. They need to be brought along for the ride. Challenges, students who lack video watching skills. Not every student knows how to take notes on a video. Some of them just sort of show up and listen and absorb. A lot of students do not watch content video at home. It's part of students supporting the instructional strategy. Finally, a lot of videos are not engaging. So stop the video and think about this question. Any questions, thoughts, concerns? So now, to conclude the video, I am sharing with you all my sources that I've created for you to sort of give you an idea of how to make video and give you an idea of what you should think about, what information you should know when making video. So here's some content sources, ways to use video in the classroom, information about copyright law, and resources for actually making video in the classroom. Here's some tutorial videos I've made on how to use Windows Live Movie Maker, how to upload PowerPoint to YouTube, and how to use Microsoft Animation.